G'day YouTube, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got a super exciting review of the brand new MoFoRC TBX50 size motor for the SCX24. This is quite possibly the most powerful brushed 50 size motor ever released for the SCX24 platform. If you're interested in finding out more, stick around, it's coming right up. So I had to sneak a little bit of footage in here right up front so you guys could see how amazing the slow speed control on this MoFoRC TBX50 motor is. This is a 50 size brush motor for the SCX24 and this is the 30k version. It comes in two versions, there's a 20k and a 30k, and that refers to the RPM of the motor. So this is the faster of the two, and I'm running it here on 3S, and as you can see there's absolutely no issues with the low speed control, and the torque that this thing produces is just absolutely mind-boggling. As you're crawling along, you can just sort of select the speed that you want the vehicle to go. It doesn't matter what the vehicle hits. If it goes through a bind, hits an obstacle, has to go up a hill, this thing will just keep on pushing. You never have to pull more trigger to go up a hill. It'll just keep turning the wheels no matter what. It's an absolutely amazing experience, and it's one incredible brushed motor. So the release of this little motor couldn't have come at a better time for me. I've just got done putting together this dedicated brushed Texoma RC Slayer. It's a pretty cool little setup. It's got 3S LiPo mounted on the front axle with Texoma's BOA battery mount. Fits really neatly up front with the servo there. This thing is running SCX24 portal axles, and it's got the CR18P Metal Gear transmission in it. As far as brushed setups go for a high performance rig, this is, in my opinion, about as good as it gets. I had been running the Injora Pro motor in this rig on 3S. This is a great motor. It's before this TBX50 came out, I would say this was probably one of the best motors on the market. It's got a ton of torque. When run on an aftermarket ESC, it's got a really nice slow crawl, and it's just a great all-round motor, and I was quite happy to keep this as the motor in this rig. But then I noticed the TBX50 came out from MoFoRC, and of course I had to try it. This version here is the 30k. It comes in two different versions. There's a 20k which refers to the RPM, and this one here, which is the 30k. I wanted to go for the quicker one, and hoping that the slow crawl was going to be pretty solid, and I'm not disappointed at all. The slow crawl on this thing is absolutely epic. To take full advantage of this motor and get the best possible slow crawl out of it, you will need to run an aftermarket ESC, something like the Furitek Lizard Pro, the Dinky RC D-Drive Micro Sport, the MoFoRC Rockwolf, which just came out, would also be an excellent choice. In this particular rig, I'm running the Furitek Iguana Pro. It's a brushed only ESC that's 3S capable. It's pretty similar to a Lizard Pro, it's just brushed only. The reason why you'd want to run an aftermarket ESC to get the best out of the TBX50 is because the magnet strength in the motor is absolutely insane. This is just a drill bit. You can see if I stick it to the side of the motor, I can just about take the weight of the rig just with the magnet strength of that motor alone. Now, when running, say, the stock axial V2 electronics, what that causes is quite a high startup. And by startup, I mean the minimum amount of throttle that it takes to get the motor turning will be quite high. When running it with an aftermarket ESC like the Furitek, you've got all of the adjustments for the FOC and the slow crawl and throttle curves and all that sort of stuff, and that really helps to get the absolute best out of the motor. And you've got a screaming top end, an absolute ton of torque, and the slow crawl is really impressive as well. If you only have stock electronics to choose from, then you could try the TBX50, but my personal recommendation would be the TBX50 3.0. That motor will get you a really nice slow crawl, a really good top end, all on 2S and running the stock electronics. That's my favorite option for stock V2 and V1 electronics. So you're thinking, why even bother with brushed when there's so many good brushless options out there? Well, there's a few different reasons why you might want to choose brushed. Low CG, you can see here with this layout that the motor is sitting forwards of the vehicle's center line, and it's as low as you can get the thing down on the skid. That's something that's really advantageous with brush setups, being able to position that weight really low. A lot of brushed motors tend to sit up a lot higher. You've got to take into consideration the spinning can if it's an outrunner, and sometimes it's just difficult to fit a brushless motor in a particular type of chassis. The other reason would be cost. Brush motors are typically a lot cheaper than a brushless. This particular one runs somewhere in the $17 to $18 region. I'll leave a link down in the description if you're interested. And brushless motors are usually about double that cost. Another excellent reason to choose brushed would be throttle feel. I just really enjoy the linear throttle feel that you get from a really well dialed in brush system, but that's just personal preference. One thing I noticed while running this rig, while I was getting everything set up and the ESC tuned in on the Furitek app, is that on a warm day, this motor is putting out a lot of power. It's got a ton of torque. It does produce a bit of heat. On a fairly sunny day, I'm seeing temps at the motor of about 120 degrees and at the ESC of about 100 degrees. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't think it's really a problem, but it's a characteristic that's going to be present with the brush setup, that the brushless systems tend to run a fair bit cooler. If you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to show some screenshots of the Furitek app to give you an idea of the settings that I'm running that have allowed me to get the really nice slow crawl out of this motor. The Iguana Pro from Furitek comes with a really funky throttle curve by default. The Iguana Pro is intended to be paired up with the Chameleon brushed motor from Furitek, and Furitek has supplied their own throttle curve by default to get the best out of that motor, and I've found that throttle curve works really well for other brushed motors as well. So that's the curve that I'm running. I'll show that at the end of the video, so if you're running Lizard Pro or similar, you can copy that curve and try to emulate this setup here. Another thing aside from throttle curves and settings in the app itself that you can do to improve slow crawl and throttle feel is if your radio has exponential adjustments, you can add a little bit of negative expo on the throttle just to help hit those really nice slow speeds. Before I removed the Injora Pro motor, I made sure to do an unloaded wheel speed test on the bench so that we can compare what sort of mile per hour figure we're getting from the Injora Pro on 3S compared to the Torque Beast X30K on 3S. As you can see from that test there, the Injora Pro motor on 3S clocked in at 1.52 miles per hour. The Torque Beast X30K is considerably faster, clocking in at about 1.76 miles per hour. I want to just do a little demonstration to show you guys how much torque this little motor puts out. I've got our incline ramp set up at 90 degrees. I'm going to set the throttle trim to establish a really nice slow crawl. I'm just going to place the truck on the bench and let it run into the ramp here without adding any more throttle, and we'll see what happens. that's enough waffling about the motor on the bench. Let's get this thing outside and I'll try my best to give you guys a small taste of what this motor has to offer. So this footage here was shot with the ESC tuned the way that I show towards the end of this video. However, after shooting this footage, I was able to improve things even further by adding a little bit of negative exponential to the throttle channel on my radio, and that just made it easier to hit those really low down speeds. It's by no means bad in this footage here, it's doing a really good job. So if this looks pretty impressive, then just know that it even got a little bit better as I added that expo to the throttle. This motor is similar in characteristics to the Injora Pro. It reminds me a lot of that motor when driving it. It's just got a lot more of everything. It's got a ton more power, it's got more top end speed. It's kind of just like the Injora Pro on steroids. It's an amazing motor and it's a really unique driving experience amongst brush motors that are currently available. And if you notice throughout this clip, the wheels on the truck never actually stop moving. That motor just keeps on going no matter what resistance is met. So it's a very brushless like experience in that you can just pull the trigger to get the truck moving at the speed that you want, and when it hits an obstacle, hits a hill, hits some form of resistance, that motor doesn't stall out. You don't have to grab any more throttle, it just keeps on pushing the wheels. It's a very smooth, controlled experience. And this is the fast version of the motor as well. This is the 30k, remember, so it does come in a 20k, and that 20k will be slower, but it should also improve on the low end performance. Also, something I'd like to mention as we're watching this footage back is that this truck is built extremely light. I'm weighing it on the scales now as we watch this footage back, and I'm seeing a weight with the battery installed ready to run of 380 grams. So that's something to consider with this setup. It is very light, but this motor puts out so much torque, I don't really see it having much of an issue with a heavier rig. Looking at the description on the MoFoRC website for this motor, there's absolutely no mention of the turn count used in this motor. So with that information being proprietary and the magnets that are being used in this particular unit, I can't see any other company being able to improve on this design. The torque density that has been jam-packed into this size and format of motor is quite possibly the best that we'll ever see for an SCX24. So after getting this rig built with the Injora Pro installed and tuning the ESC for that motor and 3S, I was actually really happy with how the truck was performing. The low speed control was great, it had a ton of torque, and the top end was right where I needed it to be. I didn't really feel that could be improved upon much. The Injora Pro is a great motor, and I was kind of satisfied for that to be the motor that lives in this truck until Nick from MoFoRC dropped these Torque Beast X series of motors. Of course I had to give it a try. I wasn't actually expecting a huge leap forward in performance. I thought it was just going to be another 50 size motor, a few little changes here and there. I didn't really expect it to be the giant leap forwards in performance that it is. I know it sounds like I'm making a big deal out of this motor, but until you try it, you won't really understand the amount of torque that this little guy is producing. If you're a fan of brushed motors, or maybe you're on a tight budget and you want to build the absolute best possible brushed rig you can, you're definitely going to want to check out the new MoFoRC Torque Beast X series of motors. I really can't overstate the power density that they've managed to cram into this tiny little motor. I really don't think it's possible to make a motor that's more powerful than this. It's really just insane, and you need to try it for yourself to see that it really is a step up from everything else available at the moment. That's where we're going to wrap it up for today. If you got any value out of this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you've got any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to get to them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.